Haichka chiefs, elders, youth, dignitaries, and everyone here today. My ancestral name is Quintiltonot. Thank you so much for inviting me into your territory to speak with you, and I'm honored to speak with such esteemed colleagues as well. The last time I was here was in October for the initial and your final agreement, and at that time I too talked about how the treaty is a toolbox that you had finished building, which offered you the chance to build your future with your own hands. I talked about the importance of your plans and your dreams, and I talked about how proud we are at Tsawwassen, how we face our challenges and our opportunities ourselves as we move forward with self-government. And finally, I talked about the difficult choice you have in front of you, the cold, harsh comfort of the Indian Act, or a future where opportunities and challenges come with risks and rewards, with decisions that you will be solely responsible for making. Well, that choice is just a little over a month away now. It's a big decision, and as with all major decisions, there are people that are speaking on both sides of it. I'm here today not to argue for or against your final agreement. That's your choice, and up to your community to have dialogue amongst each other about that. What I'm here to do is to provide you information from the perspective of a First Nation 3 years into treaty. I'd like to talk about how it feels to be self-governing, what some of the changes are, and how we are now making decisions as a community. Let me start with the very first day our treaty came into effect, April 3rd, 2009. We ran a huge celebration that day on our terms with a significant cultural component and spent lots of time highlighting the laws that we passed on that day, which in my mind really symbolized the assertion of our self-government power. Every April 3rd, it's the effective date anniversary. We call it Treaty Day, and we celebrate every year. We also had a burning of the Indian Act, although it was more along the lines of Coast Salish cultural aspect to it. But right away after the effective date, things were different. Our first decisions we made didn't have to be approved by Indian Affairs, and we didn't make them under the authority of a Band Council resolution. We made them under what we called an Executive Council order, which is a record-keeping document that we created. Even that simple little thing, the transition to a different kind of decision document, was important and symbolic in our view. And it was a funny thing too, because the federal and provincial governments had to catch up with us. We had quite a bit of confusion when DFO demanded just a couple months in to see a Band Council resolution to authorize the purchase of a vessel for registration purchases. One of the other things that was surreal after the effective day was the introduction and welcome to Metro Vancouver, our regional government's body, just 3 weeks after our effective date. I had a baby 3 days after that. Sorry, I'll try and speak closer. I had a baby 3 days after that inaugural meeting, so when I went in there I was super pregnant. All of a sudden, after a short celebration event to welcome Tsawwassen, there I was sitting around the same table as all those mayors that had spent so long railing against the inclusion of First Nations in that governance structure. So it was a bit of a twilight zone to be there. And now, one of the things I'm really proud of is at that table, or with senior levels of government, we no longer have to assert that we're another level of government. It's recognized. Before I felt like we were always whining, we're a government too. But now it's assumed when we walk into a situation. I can't tell you what a difference that makes in relation to our confidence as an organization. Then we had our first election under our new government structure, which was fascinating. On top of our executive council, and that body sort of looks like our former chiefing council, we have a Tsawwassen legislature, which is 12 members responsible for making laws. Previously, the Minister of Indian Affairs passed our laws. And I was very interested in how our members would take to our new government structure, particularly how many people would run in the election to be members of the legislature. And as it turned out, we had 18 nominations for 12 positions, and voter turnout was awesome. 75% of our members voted. And later, of course, we had the very first meeting of our legislature. We were very nervous about how that might work, about whether this thing we created with our community through our Constitution would take on and breathe life into the provisions of our final agreement. The Constitution, of course, is one of the key tools of the final agreement, a tool that we put life into for it to be effective, and our legislature has certainly done so. They have brought a level of discourse of dialogue into Tsawwassen and have brought a lot of things into the open. I'm so proud we've been able to achieve this in my little community, and I'll chat a little bit more about that in a bit. We also passed our first budget under self-government, and to some it might sound like a small thing, but it's a huge thing to the members of my community. The budget was one area where we could and did do things differently. We created a budget act, which our legislature had to pass. In order for them to pass it, we had to debate it several times in an open meeting that anybody in the community could attend, and they could ask whatever questions they wish. And we have the managers of our programs present to provide the required context and background information. And these debates are often contentious, but they provide a transparent arena to discuss important decisions facing our people. Then we publish our budget with a service plan, which tells our members what we're going to do with the funds they've allocated. And finally, we publish our annual report, which talks about how close we came to accomplishing our service plan objectives. And I really believe this transparency and accountability is an important step and has showed our members that our decisions are based on our collective input and deliberation. And as a final important step, we created an economic development corporation that was set up with a separate board of directors and wholly owned by Tsawwassen. It's responsible for moving our development plans forward and generating a sustainable economy, including jobs and businesses at Tsawwassen. This is pretty key when our treaty hinges on generating revenue. And they've been hard at work for some time, and they are the ones responsible for moving many of our projects forward to where they are now. All of these were big, big steps, and we got through them all in the space of a year. Those were what I call the stage of firsts. Now that we're 3 years in, we've seen 3 full cycles of the operation of all of our institutions. In fact, we're just a few months away from our second election since our treaty. That will be a further good test of the legitimacy of our institutions. Since the treaty, we've seen the operation of our executive council, our legislature, our advisory council, our judicial council, and our prosecutor. And I think what I've seen emerge is what I view as a culture of governance, which has fundamentally changed how our people react to decision-making in our community and to the treaty and to governance. Some of you have actually come to Tsawwassen to see our legislature in action, but I think it's important to share a little bit about our structures, so I'll share a little bit on that. My most important observation with our legislature is that it has replaced federal and provincial governments over which we had no control. Our legislature has sat 6 times now, and we've just recently wrapped up our spring session. And I've watched with great interest as our members on the legislature have been elected, have explored their role, and have begun to assert their authority. The 13 members who were elected ended up being representative of almost every large family in Tsawwassen, which we had hoped would be the outcome. We have some cultural elements to it. One of the most successful has been a talking feather, a concept generated by our community, which legislators pass to one another before speaking. Not only was this an important cultural element to include in our structure, but it elevated the level of discourse by forcing ourselves to have discipline and think about what we have to say before we speak while we're engaged in debate. So I found it exciting to see the community take charge on developing these mechanisms. The members took over, and I was so grateful for that. They created the individual legislator feathers that we bring in a medicine mantle when we start a session, and they developed the role of our speaker, speako in our language, and they completely took it over and told me what was going to happen, and I was delighted. The reaction of the members on our legislature has been very powerful. The tone of our debate is civil, though it's clear we're very engaged and don't always agree. In addition to passing laws, the legislature has had an opportunity to make resolutions which serve as powerful indicators to the community what the priorities of the community are. They've asked for strategies in community safety, which has provoked a lot of discussion. They've also asked to have discussion about treaty benefits and the appropriate distribution of benefits to members. At the end of the last session, we asked for feedback on the operations of our legislature, and we received a powerful endorsement of the process. Most of the members said that they finally felt our families were back at the decision table and that they had a voice in respect to our community's most important decisions. We've had so many distinguished visitors address our legislature, including Sophie, I might add. But our highlight was when the Honourable Stephen Point visited and said, "It is not a new government for the Tsawwassen people. As the Tsawwassen people have always been self-determining, you are only putting on the robes of your treaty and taking off the shackles of your Indian Act, of the Indian Act." We also have an advisory council which advises on laws, budgets, and policy, and yet is another check and balance. And is yet another check and balance that encourages community participation. We created important feedback and accountability loops with our executive council and our legislature to ensure that the input is more than token. This council involves and includes many people who are not supportive of the treaty. We welcome them to continue to come and express their perspectives, and the advisory council provides a useful forum for them to do so. We have a very good turnout at this group with over 15 people meeting every 2 weeks to discuss issues and provide advice to our government on an ongoing basis. And that's every policy and law that's being developed that they have input on. Other institutions and governance processes have also been transformed. We are required by our own laws to hold an annual general meeting, which takes place shortly after we've concluded our audit. And I'm impressed by how it's evolving. As knowledge by the community increases on such areas, budget and decision-making processes, and we become used to our new accountability and reporting structures, the meetings are becoming much more relaxed and respectful. I used to just dread bad meetings before. But now, for example, the largest concern raised at past AGMs have been in respect to how we're funding post-secondary and K-12 education. But the way the concern is voiced is in a constructive manner and suggests that it's an area of priority spending. And it's done in a way that's forward-thinking, that is looking to resolve some of our problems. And it's done in a way where our community is starting to recognize that this discussion can actually impact our decision processes. So now we have, because of the treaty, the capability and the tools to respond to that need, although we don't have all the money we want to implement those things yet. We've also concerned ourselves with enforcement and conflict resolution in relation to our laws. And to that regard, other institutions we've set up are a special prosecutor integrated with the provincial court system to enforce Tsawwassen laws, and a judicial council currently headed up by a retired judge to ensure Tsawwassen members have recourse over decisions made or laws made by Tsawwassen government. One of our key concerns with respect to all these institutions was to ensure we were integrating culture back into our processes, as it had largely drifted out of our institutions after decades of Indian Affairs oppression. So to that end, we formed a standing committee on language and culture whose aim is to in part encourage, monitor, and support us in our ongoing efforts to make our systems culturally relevant. And we'll do this a bit as we go, as now we have more time to think through these processes and to design them in a way that relate to our traditions and basically to allow things to evolve. So these are some of the changes to our institutions, but we're also making changes to our programs and services that we deliver to our individual members. because we have the opportunity and flexibility as a result of the treaty. We made a strategic decision to focus first on education, and so we've made changes such as increasing the level of student support to our members in school, eliminating daycare fees for Tsawwassen members that attend our daycare and early childhood education center, and renegotiating our education agreement with the Delta School Board. And we will continue to examine further changes, including potentially down the line, starting our own school if we continue to be disappointed with the local school board's performance. And while our focus is education, we also want to take a more overall look at our programs and services. The Indian Act forced us to look at everything in silos, with the program separate from the other program. We can now look at our programs together and build them so that we best support our members' individual experiences. We also have, of course, our laws that set the framework under which we operate. We brought 23 laws into effect on your effective date, a few more since then. It's pretty amazing how they've changed the way we think about our operations and the way our members relate to us, because we have a firm and published set of rules. Our actions are set out more clearly. It helps us organize our work. It helps our members hold us accountable for certain commitments. And by the way, although we spent a lot of time thinking about our final agreement, we rarely refer to that. And our book of legislation is tattered because we refer to that all the time. As for our members, how are they feeling? Well, it's both an extremely exciting time and a stressful time, as it's a time of significant change for members of Tsawwassen First Nation, and change is always stressful. But it's also a time of great excitement. The changes that are coming will happen too quickly for some, and not quickly enough for others, particularly some of the land-related changes we're facing. And our community is still stressed out about can we prepare for the phase out of the tax exemption, so we have tax transition work that lies ahead of us. But our members have been involved in every single major decision we've made along the way, from our treaty, to our land use plan, to our constitution, to the major economic development projects we're now working on. And we're seeing our new institutions and processes becoming entrenched in our members' minds. But our members have a responsibility to engage and participate, just as you are here today. This cannot work without community involvement. With our location in Tsawwassen, we've had so much excitement and interest in our lands for such a long time, and now the treaty has finally given us the tools to turn that excitement and interest into actual work on our land. So I'm just going to give you some numbers that paint the economic picture of the type of change we're contemplating. Once we've completed the build-out of our community, we'll have created a sustainable revenue stream that will help us achieve our vision, rebuild our culture, and ultimately achieve socioeconomic parity with those living in Metro Vancouver. We've done some financial modeling at Tsawwassen. Pre-treaty, the total value of land assets to Tsawwassen was about $140 million. Our property tax was about $600,000. We had about $10 million in annual revenue, mostly from the government. In 10 years, we expect our total land value to be $1.4 billion, our tax base to be $18 million, and our annual revenue to be about $33 million, mostly from property taxes and only source revenue from economic development. So what's the reason for this turnaround? Yes, it's nice to have valuable land, but we've had a reserve there for over 100 years and weren't able to build a sustainable economy. The answer was self-government. It's that self-government that gives us the tools to develop our land base. So while it's a time of change, I think the change is so exciting compared to being stuck where we were before the treaty on extremely valuable lands that we were unable to do anything with. We are now transitioning from a position of poverty management to wealth management. I've described some of the changes and how our community has embraced and reacted to these changes. I want to stress that all of these changes are undertaken by our own authority. We are solely responsible for this. If we do well, we benefit entirely, but if we do poorly, and if we make the wrong decisions, we have much to lose. Is there a risk? Absolutely. but that's our right. Self-governance is ours to seize if we want it. We've chosen to embrace that responsibility and that power. Our decisions are ours. We own them. We own our land. We say what happens on it. We say how we treat our people. We still face challenges, don't get me wrong, as we evolve. For example, we're still trying to resolve sewer issues with Metro Vancouver. And although we're on the board of Metro Vancouver, I'm still trying to find my voice as we're the single First Nation representative on that institution. Talk about a square peg in a round hole. However, we have better tools available now to be able to solve some of these problems than we did before. So I hope I've left you with some food for thought, that I've described a bit about what our community looks and feels like post-treaty, and that I've outlined some of the changes that are possible if we create a vision and then work towards fulfilling that vision. But this is the Tsawwassen experience. You have to do your homework on hopes and goals and opportunities here at Sly Island. I hope that you've had some opportunity to hear about or read about the toolbox that is your treaty. If you haven't, I encourage each of you to find what information you can, learn about the treaty and what it offers, identify the key trade-offs inherent in the treaty, the modification of the tax exemption in exchange for the ability to reap significant tax revenues on your lands, the exchange of undefined Aboriginal rights for clearly defined rights, and you do not lose your status or health benefits. In fact, my 3 daughters are just gaining their status, by the way. So if you decide that this treaty isn't your path, please talk about what is your path. This discussion about your collective future should be a community building exercise. It should be about you identifying your vision for your future and about ways to get there. Your leaders need direction about what you want, not what you don't want. And if I can leave you with one teaching as you work through the next few weeks with your community, it's to be tough on the issues and easy on the people, not the other way around. These are weighty issues, and we often have very strong opinions about them. When you disagree with someone, stay focused on the merits of the argument rather than the merits of the person making the argument. Respect is critical here to have a community dialogue that results in an outcome the community can work with and accept. Everyone is speaking from their own experience and from their hearts and out of great love and passion for our families and hopes for our future generations. In 1 month, you'll have the power to decide what lies in your future. A month and a bit, I guess. I know that what you decide will be what's right in your heart for the community, for your family, for your future. I wish all the best of luck as you wrestle with that decision. I said in October, and I'll say it again, decolonizing is painful, but rebuilding our communities is worth it. We can do a better job than Indian Affairs has done for us for over a century or more. I think as First Nations people, we can do this. We are up to the task. And I do have to admit that I'm relieved that this painful soul searching that you are facing right now is well behind us at Tsawwassen. But as always, anything we can do to help as you make your way forward, the offer will always stand and we will always be there for you should you need us. Thank you so much.